Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to educating and empowering men to address erectile dysfunction, improve confidence, and enhance the satisfaction in their relationships. This podcast is brought to you by erectioniq.com. Learn more at erectioniq.com.
Welcome to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. I am Mark Goldberg, certified sex therapist. I am deeply passionate about working with men like you to help resolve their ED.
We're going to discuss ED sex and how you can become desensitized and how that ultimately will or can impact erectile dysfunction. What exactly does it mean to become desensitized sexually?
So desensitization is a change in how somebody responds to a stimulus. So what that means is usually over the course of time, if a person finds that a certain type of stimulation, either physical or mental, was able to elicit a sexual response in a minute, and over time, that same stimulus may take 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 10 minutes, or even more, that would be a desensitization to a sexual stimulus. This can happen both on a physical level and also on a mental level. Certain types of stimulation over time, physically, will no longer deliver the same results. And that may have to do with decreased sensitivity physiologically in terms of the nerve endings in sexual organs. And certainly when we're talking about men in the penis, over time there is deterioration of nerves. There is less blood flow. These things impact physical sensitivity. There also is a desensitization process that can occur mentally where thoughts, fantasies, images, video, quality of relationship, novelty, these things can decrease over time and be less arousing and ultimately create a decreased sensitivity to these stimulations.
If someone is desensitized to sex or a sexual partner, can that cause erectile dysfunction?
Sure. So both physical and mental stimulation are generally necessary for a man to be able to achieve an erection in a sexual encounter. So if a man over time finds that certain types of stimulation were really, really impactful, really effective in helping to facilitate an erection in his 20s, but he just doesn't find it as intriguing or as arousing. So he may struggle to achieve an erection if that is the type of stimulation that is being used. This commonly would occur in a partnered setting where a couple doesn't really communicate about their sexual script, about what they do, and they have it pretty much routine. Over time, a man's partner doesn't know that he may need something to be changed because he isn't speaking up about it. And this can lead to not having the right type or adequate stimulation to facilitate an erection.
Is becoming desensitized to a sexual partner simply just a part of being in a long-term relationship?
I think it can be. I think many people find that their sexual response is at a peak with novelty. And long-term relationships do lack a certain sense of novelty. You know your partner, you probably know every inch of their body, you know a lot about what they like, you've had a lot of experiences with them already. Of course, novelty can be incorporated into a long-term relationship, but it still is the same person. So I think that there is going to be an element of decreased sensitivity over time just by loss of certain elements of novelty. Let me just add one piece with that, though. I don't think that the loss of novelty needs to equate to desensitization to the point of erectile dysfunction. So while I think it's normal and to be expected that there should be some decrease in sensitivity, I think that there's a lot that couples and individuals can be doing to maintain enough novelty that it should not necessarily have to impact erections and sexual function.
A topic we often discuss on this podcast is pornography and the use of porn and its impact on erections. How about when it comes to becoming desensitized? Does pornography play a role in being desensitized to sex?
So this is a difficult question. I think the concept of porn-induced erectile dysfunction is largely built on this idea that consumption of pornography will lead to a desensitization. And as I've mentioned multiple times on this podcast, I do not subscribe to this concept. And there's a number of reasons why that I will not go back into right now. What we do know is that porn has the ability to deliver high levels of mental stimulation, and it does allow people to more deeply engage with forms and types of sexual activity that they may otherwise not be able to, things that they cannot act out or they cannot engage in their relationships, or things that may just not even be feasible or maybe not even of interest to actually engage in real life. So we know that there can be a very high level of stimulation. So I also believe that anything that a person consumes has some impact. As people's expectations, their sexual awareness, and interests expand through porn consumption, I think it is possible that they will be less sensitive or responsive to other types of sexual stimulation. So this can give the appearance of desensitization, but this may be misleading because the sexual reactivity may just have shifted more toward the content of the porn or to something new that they have discovered, as opposed to there being a real decrease in sensitivity.
Understood. Is it possible to prevent becoming desensitized?
So I'm generally hesitant to say that something is impossible. However, I will say that I don't think that preventing becoming desensitized is a very likely outcome for many people. In other words, this is, I think, a part of life. There are just a number of biological factors that are going to impact physical sensitivity over the lifespan. And generally, the direction is decreased sensitivity with age and physical challenges with the body. The mind also adapts and regulates to stimulation. The more it sees the same thing, the less it's going to respond and react. And I believe that these are just realities of who we are as human beings. So I think that while it's an important element for people to stay focused on and stay aware of, I don't think it's helpful to measure a baseline sensitivity that a man may experience in his 20s and expect to be able to replicate that in his 30s, 40s, and 50s. Things are going to change over time. But again, going back to the question that you asked about erectile dysfunction, I don't think decrease in sensitivity has to lead to sexual dysfunction.
And what other things besides watching porn and a long-term sexual partnership, what other things besides these things that we discussed can cause a man to become desensitized to sex?
So, Casey, the way you formulated that question brings up something that I think is really important. I think we need to differentiate between desensitization to specific forms of stimulation and a general desensitization to sex. I alluded to this a little bit in the question about porn, but I want to really sharpen this idea for a moment. Many men are going to experience desensitization to a form or multiple forms of stimulation over time, but they may continue to be sexually aroused by other forms of stimulation. I don't think porn or a long-term partner create a general desensitization. And you see this very often where a man goes from a sexless relationship or a sexless marriage to a robust sex life with a new partner, either post-divorce or through infidelity. This man has become desensitized to his partner, but not really to sex. When we talk about across-the-board desensitization, I think we're looking at things more in the category of depression, which is a mental health condition that really dulls sensitivity. It dulls receptiveness to pleasure across the board. So things like porn and acclimating to a long-term relationship may cause specific desensitization. Mental health concerns like depression and anxiety can cause more of an across-the-board decreased sensitivity or decreased responsiveness to stimulation.
Is there anything we missed, Mark, that you wanted to touch on before we wrap up? Any other final thoughts for us?
So I think we've covered this topic pretty thoroughly. I know that this is an area that a lot of men are exploring when they encounter sexual dysfunction or when they encounter erectile dysfunction. I think that there is a lot that a man can learn about himself by looking at the factors in which at one point he was sensitive to and is now experiencing decreased sensitivity. But I think expanding what somebody could potentially be sensitive to is oftentimes more impactful and more effective than trying to necessarily rebuild what once used to work. So I want men to really have that message with them.
If you listen to this podcast regularly, you know there is a huge mental component that goes into achieving an erection. Mark Goldberg, the certified sex therapist who hosts this podcast, felt as though this was a very underserved topic of education in men's health. That's why he designed Beyond the Little Blue Pill, the thinking man's guide to addressing ED. The course is designed to educate and fundamentally help you change the way you think about erections. Check it out at erectioniq.com/course. You can explore 3 modules of this course completely free. See if there's something in there that can help you. erectioniq.com/course, and you can learn more there.
Thanks for listening to the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. For more information on today's topic and understanding how the mind impacts erectile dysfunction, please visit erectioniq.com.